But I want to start us off by just telling you a little bit about me. I am Dr. Amit Dominic. I am the founder and president of Texas Prisons Community Advocates. This has been a topic that I have been working on since about 2015. That's where my journey actually got started as an impacted family member, and then later working with various organizations and founding my own organization where this is our primary agenda item. We've been working with legislators throughout the years. So for the first bills that were ever filed on this topic, working with Senator Menendez and Representative Canales. And then later on, we have Representative Sherman, who's also filed several bills on this topic. Representative Bryant, who's not here. So those are just a couple of the individuals that we've been working with on this topic. And it's gotten to the point where our legislators just aren't able to do what needs to be done. So another major avenue for addressing this issue would be some type of legal assistance. I want to mention just a little bit about some of the research we've done on the topic, where we've spoken with incarcerated individuals, we've spoken with their family members on exactly what's going on behind those walls and how excruciating these conditions are.
We have an issue that you are all well aware of. As a former city manager, I will tell you that our animal shelters, we are required by law to have AC. And if we do not have AC, someone's going to pay for this. And there is no animal that the Word of God says was made in the image of God. And yet we have more than 2/3, approximately, of our citizens incarcerated in housing conditions that are inhumane. Temperatures rise above 140 degrees, according to Texas A&M, at sometimes during the summer heat. We can do better. We have the resources. We just seem to not have the compassion to address this issue. And for those who say that if you do the crime, you should do the time, this has nothing to do with who we are. The one that we say we will follow, the one that we pledge allegiance to beyond this state and this country, Jesus Christ. The first thing that he says that he's going to say when he comes back is, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was a stranger, you took me in. When I was sick, you visited me. And when I was in prison, you visited me. I get it. I understand. Even the first sermon that Jesus preached, found in Luke chapter 4, when he preached that first sermon, they wanted to kill him because he said that he had a message for the marginalized and for those who were incarcerated. If we're going to be true to our fidelity to the gospel, we must appropriate the resources. And it's not because we don't have the resources. We have the resources. And as I filed legislation HB 1355 last session, Representative Canales and Representative Bryant also filed legislation to address this issue because we had the resources. With $32 billion in surplus, we just didn't have the will to do it. And so I hope and pray that we will do as we should. Nelson Mandela said that you judge a nation by how it treats those that are in its jails. And really, you can't judge a nation by how it treats the upper echelon. Now, I've stated his quote many times, but this time I did it and put my own spin on it. But he was simply saying, we have an obligation to take care of fellow humans. Texas leads the union in the number of exonerations. meaning we incarcerate more people who are innocent than any other state in the union. That alone ought to say to us, give us a God conscience to provide AC for all that we incarcerate. We have the responsibility to provide housing and protection for those that are incarcerated. And if we require by law, and we do, for the counties to provide air conditioning for inmates, then we should on the state level as well. Finally, in conclusion, I want to say that imagine we could fix this problem if we simply allowed for pets to be in the prisons. If we allowed for pets to be in the jail cells of our housing units, we would immediately be required to provide AC. And this would provide the much needed living work conditions for our employees. Those TDCJ employees who work in this condition, and many of them, according to a report that I received last year, 14 of them had heat-related injuries. While at the same time, I'm sorry, not 14, 35. While at the same time, on that same report, we had the audacity to report that only 14 inmates had heat-related injuries. Now, you don't have to be a meteorologist to figure out that we're going to have some heat and record heats again this summer. But you cannot convince me that people who live there 24/7 have fewer heat-related incidents than the people who work there, who are able to work a shift and then go home. We can do better. We have to. And I am grateful for your work, TPCA, for all that you are doing to ensure that we bring humanity and sanity to our correctional system. And I will do everything that I can to fight for justice for all.
As Amita said, my name is Michelle Deitch, and I direct the Prison and Jail Innovation Lab at the University of Texas, which is a national policy resource center focused on the safe and humane treatment of people in custody. Let me say at the outset that I'm not connected in any way with the lawsuit that's been filed, and I'm speaking in a personal capacity. My views do not represent the views of the university. Today is Earth Day, and there's no better day to remember that we're facing a climate crisis in this country. Climate change means that temperatures are rising, and the most vulnerable and marginalized people in our society are bearing the brunt of these environmental changes. People in Texas prisons are among these especially vulnerable people. Compared to people in the community, people who are incarcerated have significant health problems. Our prisons are full of elderly individuals, people with diabetes, and people who take medications such as psychotropic medications and blood pressure medications that make them especially vulnerable to heat stroke and dehydration. And unlike you and I, they don't have the means to protect themselves from the heat. They can't simply walk into an air-conditioned room or take a cooling shower or get themselves an ice cold drink or open a window or sit in the shade. They are completely dependent on others to get them whatever help they need. And if they're in a prison that's not air conditioned, there may not be any relief whatsoever for months on end. This is not just a matter of being uncomfortable, it's downright dangerous. People are experiencing medical problems and they're dying from the heat, as you'll hear more about today. And it's not just incarcerated people who are suffering. The staff are also victims of this excessive heat. Day in and day out, they have to work in unbearable conditions, wearing heavy uniforms, doing difficult tasks. Many of them also have health issues and take medications that are impacted by the heat. The state is experiencing enormous challenges when it comes to recruiting and retaining staff. Is it any wonder that they don't want to work in those conditions? Beyond the health and the mortality issues, extreme heat affects prisons by leading to irritability and tension among the incarcerated population. There's research showing a causal connection between prison heat and violence. One recent study found that days with unsafe heat index levels raised daily violent interactions by 20%. So this is a safety issue we need to be concerned about. And it affects relationships between staff and prisoners too. Extreme temperatures lead to an increase in use of force. It's significantly easier to manage a facility that's air conditioned, where both staff and incarcerated people are not on edge from being uncomfortable. Heat affects what happens in prisons in other ways too. For example, when people are uncomfortable, they don't have energy to participate in programs. That can have a big impact on rehabilitation and recidivism. The heat also puts a big strain on facility infrastructure by increasing water usage, by leading to breakage of windows, by people flooding their cells in an effort to cool down the concrete floors. Extreme temperatures also put a strain on already inadequate staffing, because in addition to all their other tasks, the staff need to move people to respite areas, provide them with water and showers, and observe them for medical problems. Staff also need to shift times of certain activities, including work and recreation, to get people out in the less hot parts of the day, which causes complications such as offering recreation at 3 in the morning and getting field workers out ridiculously early in the morning. And of particular concern, suicide rates go up in the summer. I'm often asked, why should I care what happens to people in prison? Remember that 95% of people are coming back to our communities. They weren't sentenced to die in prison. And if they come out with health problems, we're all going to be footing the bill. And if you don't care about the people who are incarcerated, then at least spare a thought for the staff who are suffering as well. This is what is happening in our name, in our prison system. We're better than that. We deserve a prison system that better reflects our values as a community and that doesn't impose unnecessary suffering when we have the means to fix the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Deitch and Representative Sherman, for your thoughts on this subject. I want to be crystal clear about what it is that we are doing here today. Today, we have filed an amended complaint which seeks to invalidate the current heat mitigation or alleged heat mitigation policies in the state of Texas prison system. It's just that simple. They don't work. They endanger inmates. And everyone to a person at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice knows this. When asked directly if he knew that temperatures above 95 posed health risks to the inmates, Director Collier answered yes. This isn't up for debate anymore. My law firm and several other law firms began this process after the summer of 2011, when 10 people died of heat stroke, which is incredibly difficult to do. It takes an amazing degree of indifference and incompetence for that to happen. And then 2 more people died that we know about in 2012. And people continue to die and people continue to become hurt. But what is truly, from a Texan's point of view, infuriating is the failure to acknowledge that everyone in the system, all 130, 140,000 prisoners, are at direct risk, direct health risk of being impacted by something that has a simple solution that has been around since the 1930s, and that is air conditioning. The idea that the only public space in the state of Texas that is not air conditioned, that does not have climate control, is the Texas prison system. Think about that. Ask yourselves why that occurred. And that's what this lawsuit is about. Nelson Mandela was quoted by Representative Sherman, and I also have a quote that I think is very important, and it has been the key to the litigation success so far. It's only impossible until it's done. Nelson Mandela said that about ending apartheid in South Africa. It's only impossible until it's done. All it takes is people who care. That's it. And that is the fundamental question that we're asking the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and its leadership to answer. Do you care? Because if you do, there is a solution to the problem to end needless suffering and end senselessly putting inmates at risk. And one thing I have learned since embarking on this litigation, that every step of the way, more than 12 lawsuits, has resulted in victory so far, is that though Texas has a reputation as being conservative and tough on criminals, it also has a deep sense of responsibility and honor when it comes to the prison system. Because as Professor Deitch eloquently said, freedom is taken away from inmates, which means they are unable to protect themselves. And what I have found in Texas from the most conservative jurists and the most conservative officials is that that is a key difference, which is a fundamental game changer. When you take away people's liberty to protect themselves, the state has to step in and protect them. There is a clear solution here that everyone knows about. Okay, it's very simple. Install air conditioning. We have the resources to do it. We have the ability to do it. We have proved that the courts have required it. TDCJ has accepted it. And now this lawsuit is about, fixing what should have been fixed years ago, truly decades ago. When the department was required to air condition the PAC unit, what should have happened is it should have begun the conversation to get this started for everyone. I really respect Representative Sherman, Representative Canales, and those in government who have tried to get this done, but it hasn't happened yet. And that's the point of this lawsuit. Oftentimes, people want to do the right thing, but sometimes, and this is one of them, people need to be told that they need to do the right thing. It's a little sad to me that has to be the way of the world, but it also fills me and the other firms that frankly have the honor of representing these organizations who have put their ethos on the line, to fight for this very noble cause. It goes to the core of who we are as a society. It's very simple. Do we care about protecting people from a known health risk and ending torturous, needless suffering? To me, the answer is a very clear yes, and that is what this lawsuit is about. And I hope to the press that are on this call, a very simple question is asked to Director Collier, to the Board of the Criminal Justice. What is it going to take to do the right thing? Okay. Why has this not happened already? And again, we're the hammer that goes after the nail. We're the litigators. And there's a team that you'll hear a little bit about at the very end that is committed to ending these constitutional violations and ending these dangerous conditions of confinement. And, the commitment that we've given these organizations is that no expense will be spared. And, we can't promise victory, but it will not be for a lack of effort, a lack of resource, or a lack of capability.
I feel honored to speak. I feel saddened that I have to speak, and I feel a little nervous after speaking up behind all of the professionals that spoke before me. I had I don't know if I'm going to call it pleasure. I had the opportunity to speak before the Texas board a few months ago at their board meeting. And unbeknownst to me, initially, what Dr. Dominic told me was just tell your story. just tell them what you're going through. Just tell them. And unbeknownst to me, my story went viral. I had no idea that that would be something that I would be known for, but it was. So, as Dr. Dominic said, my husband is incarcerated in TDCJ. Something that Professor Deitch said sort of mimicked my opening statements to the board, which was, one of the hardest days in my life was the day my husband was sentenced to prison. And he was given a prison sentence, but TDCJ has most assuredly sentenced him to death. Twice he's been in medical over the summer last year, once after passing out. When I spoke before the board, 3 family members in front of me were talking about their loved ones who had passed away, who had lost their lives without any acknowledgement that it was due to the heat. One of the stories I told, which went viral, was about how my husband and his cellmate had one day during the summer decided to try to stay cool in those ungodly temperatures, which was to take their shirts and their sheets and they dumped them in the toilet water. And they laid in them with a fan to try to get some type of reprieve. There have been other stories of inmates that have flooded their cells with their toilets and their sinks and laid on the ground to be cool. These stories that we hear as loved ones, when there's nothing that we can do to help, in many ways affect our mental health. Today I'm wearing a pin that Dr. Dominic gave me from one of our campaigns, which is I'm affected. You heard my background. You've heard that I've worked for the Deputy Secretary of Health in Florida. I have an MBA. I'm a professional. Never in my mind did I thought that I would be here and I would be affected by this, but I am every day. Every day there is something that I wrote down that Mr. Edwards said. He said, torturous, needless suffering. I want to repeat that one more time. Torturous, needless suffering. These loved ones that we have are not ones that, some of them may have done crimes that you think that they didn't, as Representative Sherman said, do the time. If you didn't do the crime, I'm sorry, if you know what I'm saying, but they weren't sentenced to death. They weren't sentenced to torture. We are better than that. And as Mr. Edwards said, we have the opportunity to fix it, and that's what Texas should do. And I'm going to end my short little statement here with another story that my husband told me about somebody he was talking to, and we've already talked about how Representative Sherman said that there are laws on how you treat animals. In Texas, there's a law on air conditioning, not keeping pigs in unair-conditioned facilities. TDCJ has pig farmers. My husband talked to somebody who said at the end of the day, 110, 120 degree weather day, these pig ranchers would take the pigs back to the air-conditioned cells and then move back to their cells, which are unair conditioned, because it was inhumane for these animals to be kept in these conditions. Just think about that for just a moment. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much for having me. So while in the system, I was at a unit that did not have air conditioning, and I have high blood pressure. And so having high blood pressure, the humidity and the heat causes your heart to, have to beat faster, therefore causing a heat stroke and fainting and things like that, vomiting. And so I had a rough period while being incarcerated whenever it was hot. As you newly come into the system, you go to Woodman and you're put in these, they call it the dog pound. It has no air, no windows, and it's just like someone is just, the sun is just over you and it's just beaming over you. And it's cruel, it's miserable. And I can see how some of the inmates did want to end their lives. I had a family, thank the Lord above, that fought and fought and fought and called TDCJ. I have a mother who's now 76 years old, but she's she's something else. And she's like, hey, I'll come there and I'll sleep in front of the unit until you move my daughter to a unit that has air conditioning, or you get air conditioning, which we knew that wasn't going to happen about the time that I would be home. And because of that, I was moved to Lockhart, which is an air conditioning facility. And then once I was released, I still have chronic issues. You could probably hear it now because of the medication that I was taking, lisinopril, also does not work well with, being in the heat. You have high blood pressure. You have to remain cool. There's a certain temperature that'll mess with your socialistic and diastolistic numbers. And so when I got home, still was like suffering with the chronic bronchitis, asthma. And so it turned into that because your body is still trying to get acclimated to normal, normal conditions and weather and things like that. But so my heart goes out to the women that we serve every day that are within the Gatesville units that we go back to teach our programming to, because we have been affected directly by some of our participants, namely at the Lane Murray unit, that have suffered due to the heat, trying to make it to class so that they can be in the classrooms when there's air conditioning, however, not being able to make it there because they're suffering in the dorms because they have no heat. So it's a great, great need. My mind just boggles and I just try to process it like, if you have the means to change it, you have the money to change it, you are able to do it, why be made to do it? Why continue to allow women and men that are incarcerated to continue to die, continue to suffer? It's cruelty. We get charged if cruelty to animals, like we'll get charged for that. However, they deem us as animals incarcerated, but they're still being cruel by not doing what they have been mandated to do and can do, which is to give air conditioning to the prisons that do not have air.
Today, I'm here with the support of our board and to move forward for change. And I'm also here individually as one formerly incarcerated and personally subjected to the excessive heat during my incarceration. During my 5.5 years of incarceration, in addition to my own suffering from excessive heat, locked in solitary confinement during the summer heat, seeing temperatures at the guard picket thermometer at 139 degrees, and dealing with chronic medical conditions exacerbated by the heat, I personally witnessed a fellow inmate fall out with a heart attack due to suffrage from excessive heat. He was at medical and being told by the duty nurse, go back to your cell because there's nothing wrong with you. That really shocked all of us that were standing right there because he then dropped dead right in front of everybody. I witnessed and participated in 2 situations while being locked down. One of the guys in another cell went down because of excessive heat and no staff available, even though the policy says they're supposed to make rounds every 15 minutes, but the staff was outside of the wing and refused to come in. In another case, we banged on the doors and we were yelling and screaming, but to no avail. No one, in the one case, it was well over a half hour before someone came to help. All I know on that particular case was that this person was wheeled away on a stretcher and the staff went bonkers when they arrived on the scene. We have no idea if he recovered, was transferred to another unit, or passed on. Of great concern was also the health and well-being of the certain staff members. The staff has to wear vests, and at the time they had to wear long-sleeve shirts. In addition to the fact they were all, where I was, at stationary posts and they just couldn't get up and leave. While they could go home at the end of the day, watching them sweat profusely and begin panting and trying to adjust their uniforms so they could breathe was angering to me because as a former government employee of 29 years, honorable government employee, honorable years, I could not, and I still cannot fathom the administration subjecting government employees to ongoing cruel treatment. So those people went home and they simply never came back. I understand prison is a punishment for a crime. However, most of the population is not sentenced to death by excessive heat, and prisoners and staff do not deserve that kind of mistreatment. As Representative Sherman said, Texas leads the nation in exonerations. Those are the ones that have actually been exonerated, not the wrongfully convicted still waiting their turn, which the numbers for Texas and for the rest of the country are high. These people don't deserve this kind of mistreatment. Ongoing denial of respite, showers, cold water, ice, and more is absolutely just unacceptable. Last year was one of the hottest summers on record, and over 100 staff and prisoners suffered heat-related conditions to include death. As an advocacy organization, we petition the administration, the legislators, and the public to do the right thing and to move to immediately air condition all the prison beds that are still left to be done and not waste time on capital improvements over some 20-year project. Thank you.
Mr. Linkletter is an American film director, producer, and screenwriter. He is known for making films that deal thematically with suburban culture and the effects of the passage of time. The movie 2011 Bernie featured the plaintiff Bernie Tide's story. Jack Black played the incarcerated person. Matthew McConaughey played the prosecutor. And I remember that well. This was before I even knew about the Texas prisons and the heat. And I had actually learned about the story through watching that movie years ago. So definitely appreciated that. Mr. Linkletter's other films include comedies such as Slacker in 1990 and Dazed and Confused in 1993. The Before trilogy romance films, The Before Sunrise, 1995 and 2004, Before Midnight, 2013, the music-themed comedy School of Rock in 2003, and the adult animated film Walking Life in 2001, a Scanner Darkly in 2006, Apollo 10.5, a space-age child in 2022, and the coming-of-age drama Boyhood in 2014, and the comedy film Everybody Wants Some in 2016. Thank you for joining us today, and just even getting that movie out years ago. It was so impactful, and I believe that's one way that people can really, get into the shoes of someone else who's experiencing that. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, and adding to that long resume, I have a film that just came out on HBO called Hometown Prison. I grew up in Huntsville, in and around the prison, so it's a kind of a portrait of the town and the prison industry from that point of view. And I just want to thank everybody for being here today, who's paying attention to this urgent issue, this humanitarian crisis, and trying to affect change. I'm proud to be here amongst everyone. As a filmmaker and native Texan, my role sometimes extends beyond entertainment to echo the voices of those who cannot speak loudly enough for themselves. Today, I'm here on behalf of Bernie Tida and thousands of others who are enduring inhumane conditions within the Texas prison system. Last year, we had to fight to save Bernie's life in court, and thankfully, because we did, he was moved to an air-conditioned housing. But as summer nears, he is still not safe. Bernie and the tens of thousands of inmates remain at risk of death, heat-related sickness, and being subjected to this relentless, torturous conditions. Last summer, Bernie had what appears to have been a stroke while being housed in extreme heat. He was taken to ER and then, soon enough, returned to extreme heat. Without our quick legal action and attorney Jody Cole, Bernie very likely would have died. He is now almost completely blind in one eye and continues to have facial paralysis. He's not okay, but he survived last summer with the court's intervention. But most inmates aren't as fortunate as Bernie, and so many are becoming seriously injured or dying from extreme heat. And this, of course, is happening in the shadows where we don't see or hear their suffering. Recent investigations and expert analysis, including declarations from, esteemed professionals across environmental health, forensic pathology, and climate science, have revealed alarming evidence about the severe heat conditions in Texas prisons, obviously. These are findings that clearly demonstrate a significant increase in our mortality rates on extremely hot days in facilities without air conditioning, highlighting an urgent need for reform. This is a profound human rights crisis. The stories emerging from these facilities are harrowing. Men and women are being subjected to temperatures that exceed 100 degrees, leading to preventable deaths and severe health crises. This cruel reality has persisted despite clear evidence and repeated warnings, and it's time for a change. It is time to ensure that our correctional facilities adhere to humane standards that respect the dignity of every individual. This isn't a luxury, it's a fundamental right. We are calling for immediate action to install and maintain proper air conditioning in all Texas state prisons. The overwhelming majority of Texas citizens and our representatives are for this, and we can all be a part of the solution. Let's ensure that no one else, inmate or corrections officer, suffers under such brutal conditions. And it's not just about improving conditions, it's about saving lives and upholding our values as a society dedicated to justice and human rights. Thank you.
And I don't know if I'm going to say anything new than what's already been said today, but I can add some numbers to kind of all the topics that have been discussed. So I am trained as an epidemiologist, and within the field of epidemiology, there's a large body of research on how heat and temperature more broadly affects our health. So there are some pretty well-defined and rigorous methods that epidemiologists use to investigate these associations. And they've been used in a variety of different populations. They've been used to look at the effects of heat across the world, at city levels, among older adults, and even in non-human populations like dairy cows and manatees, interestingly enough. And so what we've learned is that heat can cause a lot of health outcomes besides heat stroke or besides heat exhaustion. So this includes renal diseases, cardiovascular mortality, increases in respiratory illnesses, and even suicides. So part of my research has just been to apply these well-defined methods to prison data and specifically mortality data out of Texas prisons. So I'm actually going to share my screen and just share some of these results. This is the result of some of the work that I published. So in 2022, this paper came out in JAMA Open Network. So it was titled The Provision of Air Conditioning and Heat-Related Mortality in Texas Prisons. So I used data of all deaths that occurred in Texas prisons between 2001 to 2019. And I was able to, able to look at the association as temperature increase. So here we can see heat index right here, and starting at a heat index of 85, since I think there's already some legislation around maybe temperatures in Texas jails can't go above 85. So what if we had something similar like that in Texas prisons? So looking at 85 all the way up to 105, and you can see that the risk of mortality increases in prisons without AC. And there's no association between change in risk of death as temperatures increase in prisons with AC. In fact, at higher temperatures, there might actually be a bit of a protective effect. So on really hot days, you might be even less likely to die in prison with AC than just on a normal day. And so with this research, I was able to determined that approximately 13% of deaths in Texas prisons without AC during warm months, so summer months, between 2001 to 2019 are attributable to extreme heat days. There was no deaths were attributable to extreme heat in prisons without AC. So I think everything that people have been saying, there's already a solution here. We already know what prevents deaths, and we know what would prevent more deaths in Texas prisons, and that is AC. And then I'm just going to share some of my latest research. And so this hasn't been published yet, but I think on the topic of how staff are affected, on the topic of other health outcomes, or other outcomes besides mortality. So I was able to get data thanks to Amit and some of the partners she works with. I was able to get data on the number of assaults that are recorded and reported. So there's definitely a difference between assaults that happen and then those that are recorded. And number of assaults between staff and someone incarcerated, and between at least two incarcerated individuals. And so this was literally just plotting out the average number of assaults that happen each month, and then doing it by whether that assault occurred in a prison without full AC or in a prison with full AC. And you can see here just like the jump in summer months. So again, more data showing that people's health in these settings are being affected, and AC could be a huge way to help prevent that and prevent more harm.
Like Amit said, my name is Marcy Marie Simmons. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance. Part of our organization's mission is to end the devaluing of women, girls, and gender expansive individuals in the Texas criminal legal system. We're announcing today that we are an organizational plaintiff and partner in the lawsuit against Brian Collier in his official capacity as the Executive Director for the Department of Criminal Justice. Lioness has over 700 directly system impacted members. A large percentage of our membership is still under the direct authority of TDCJ, myself included, as I'm on parole, making us particularly vulnerable to potential retaliation. Despite these risks, we bravely stand in pursuit for humane and non-life-threatening temperatures in Texas prisons. Our communications specialist is in constant contact with our 300 plus currently incarcerated members. Many of those members have disabilities, including mental health disabilities that require medications that have extreme temperature warnings. Last summer, our mailbox was full of concerns and pleas for help regarding the dangerous temperatures inside Texas women's prisons. We were notified of heat-induced illnesses and even deaths caused by the extreme heat. We're not talking about making incarcerated Texans comfortable. We're talking about bringing the temperatures down to safe levels of under 85 degrees Fahrenheit. As it is now, the extreme temperatures pose a significant risk to the health and well-being of those in the state's care. As summer approaches in our state, the threat of extreme heat once again appears, reminding us of the urgent need for action. I remember laying on the concrete floor in my cell, pouring water over me, trying to cool off. If we flushed the stainless steel toilet that was in our cell a few times, the water would get cooler, and we would splash that colder toilet water on our clothes and our body, trying to keep our body temperatures at a safe level. Every summer, I watch staff and my incarcerated sisters faint or fall out with heat-induced seizures. I remember walking into the hot dorm from outside, the humidity and air so thick and hot that it was hard to breathe. I remember mentally telling myself, "You can breathe. Marcy, just take a breath," because it felt unbreathable. I watched women in the summertime get carried out on stretchers, taken away by ambulances. My last summer in prison, our dorm had thermostats that were placed high out of our reach. The staff had covered the number, indicating the temperature with black electrical tape. We wanted to know what they were hiding. We felt like we had a right to know the temperature inside of our living space. A few of us got together with a little ingenuity and a little rule breaking to roll that electrical tape back. The thermostat in my housing dorm where I slept read 136 degrees Fahrenheit. 136 degrees They covered that because they didn't want us to know, and they didn't want us to tell our families. They didn't want the people out here to know.
As a personal attorney who was appalled by Bernie's case, but then began quickly to grasp the real gravity of the problem, and one that affects thousands of others trapped in the torturous heat of Texas prisons every year. It is a horrible situation, and it's one that's persisted in Texas for over 20 years, but it's truly an easy solution. We need to cool the prisons, just as we do virtually every other building where people live and work in Texas, including jails and animal housing, apparently. Former Colorado Department of Corrections Executive Director Dean Williams has joined this lawsuit as one of our experts because he knows firsthand how deeply wrong these practices are and understands at a foundational level that they must stop immediately.
So, so heat stroke is pretty rare. Like a lot of things have to happen in order for heat stroke to happen. And heat stroke can be very fatal. And even if people survive, they usually have lifelong disability from it. But when we think of like causes of death that show up on a death certificate, usually we only think of heat stroke. So like what causes a heat stroke? Heat. But within epidemiology, like we know there's like heat causes so many other health outcomes, including like myocardial infarctions, so like heart attacks, including strokes, and like not specific heat strokes, and including like respiratory failure or like severe asthma attacks.
And let me follow up with what Dr. Skarha said. A little bit more direct, and I appreciate Dr. Skarha saying that. When she says it is inconceivable as an evidentiary matter that no deaths are due to heat-related causes, that is an absolutely true statement. But I want to be crystal clear that in 2015, Quintero Jones died, and we represented his family, and he died of exacerbation of asthma due to heat-related causes. That's a 215 death that the Texas Department of Criminal Justice paid a settlement of more than $250,000 on. That is a heat-related death without question. Okay, that's not up for debate. They know about it. They know it's true. Is the fact that they paid nearly $10 million in attorney's fees and settlements because they accurately identified deaths in 2011 and 2012. I want you to think about that why that may be. But why Dr. Skarha and some of the other experts are so important in this case is from an epidemiological standpoint. They're gonna paint the picture accurately, honestly, and candidly with actual evidence, so that it's not, well, we just don't think it's happened anymore, because it has. I want to be crystal clear. In 2015, a person died from the department paid on that lawsuit. So it's simply not correct to suggest to the community that this is just a one-time 11. It was the hottest summer on record prior to that. And so that's an excellent question, and it's a talking point from TDCJ that all I can say is trust us. It will be directly refuted with actual cases and with evidence from some of the top researchers in the country, okay, from Brown University, Harvard University, etc. And we could go on, but I'm the long-winded one who took us over, so I apologize.
We've got a couple. Thanks for that answer. We've got a couple questions in the chat. Apart from the water and heat, are there other aspects of climate crisis that directly threaten the health and safety of the incarcerated people and the staff? Why? Does anybody want to jump in on that one? Maybe Professor Deitch?
Sure, I can respond. I actually teach a course called Prisons and the Environment, and we're looking at the intersection between mass incarceration and environmental harms. So this is right on target, this question. There are many issues dealing with access to clean water, the fact that a lot of the infrastructure for the prisons is quite old, and so many of the pipes are are leading to, or they've got issues that are leading to the water being contaminated in many ways. There's the fact that many prisons are built near toxic sites. Some are built near Superfund sites. There's facilities, and this is true really all over the country. It's not unique to Texas, but they're built in places where there's chemical exposures and other kinds of toxins. There's the fact that natural disasters are affecting the prisons quite substantially. Many prisons are built in floodplains. And so we're seeing increased amounts of flooding during hurricanes or even bad storms, for example. The ice storm and cold weather is also having an incredible impact on the prisons. We could go on and on, but there are a tremendous number of environmental issues that are having a tremendous impact on the quality of life inside the facilities and the conditions of confinement.
Thank you. Do we have
May I add to that really quick? I would just like to add very quickly that my take from that question was, and I think that it was brought up earlier about the physical violence in the summertime. Definitely people are more aggressive. Not only does the hot weather make incarcerated individuals more aggressive, but the staff do their rounds and they walk less. They are less likely to be present to be able to stop a physical altercation. And then obviously the mental and the emotional trauma that it puts on incarcerated individuals during those summer months. Your body and your mental state are in complete survival mode. So it takes you to a whole nother level where now we're not communicating with families on the outside as much.
Thank you. We are well over time. We're going to have one more question and then we're going to call it. Do we have one more question? I'm checking the chat. Oh, okay. So Juan's question is in the chat. In the filings of Mr. Tide's original lawsuit, TDCJ had claimed, I'll let you guys read this, had claimed that Mr. Tide was already in air-conditioned housing before the lawsuit and that TDCJ was already focusing on his health issues. And TDCJ also claimed that the lawsuit was part of an effort to get him released from prison. I think we're going to throw that one to either Mr.
I'm happy to talk. I'm Jody Cole, and I'm the
Yes,
original attorney that filed this. Mr. Tita had what appeared to be a stroke, and we gained visual evidence of that stroke. And once he went to the ER, when he was returned back to TDCJ, he was returned into unair-conditioned housing, and his health rapidly deteriorated. And so fortunately, we thought to do a temporary restraining order, which orders the prison to quickly move him into air conditioning. And we had to fight it the whole way. So we want him to live, and we are grateful to learn about this issue. We do not want one more person to die or become sick this summer from extreme heat. It's unconscionable. It should not be happening. And so I appreciate that kind of question. We will be pursuing this, and we're grateful for everyone else who has joined our efforts.
Thank you. Absolutely the perfect person to respond to that.